Before you trust anyone with your happiness, remember this. The same hands that clap for you in public may be the same hands that try to destroy your home in secret. In the heart of Grand Lagos, a silent war began inside one of the finest mansions. A man who had everything, a woman who gave everything, and another who would stop at nothing to take it all. But when jealousy turns to wickedness, even the brightest city lights cannot hide the truth forever. In the middle of the big, busy city called Grand Lagos, full of tall glass buildings, fast cars, and noisy streets, there was a man named Henry. He was one of the richest real estate developers in the city. People respected him everywhere he went. Whenever he walked into a meeting, people stood up. Whenever he entered a party, cameras flashed. His tall frame, deep voice, and smooth suits made him look like a king of the city. But even with all his money, power, and fame, there was something missing in Henry's life. At home, behind the high gates of his mansion, where gold flowers decorated the walls and the floors were clean like mirrors, there was no sound of a child, no laughter of a baby, no little footsteps running through the hallways. Only silence. Henry lived with his beautiful wife, Magdalene. Magdalene was a kind, soft-spoken woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile. She had a heart full of love and dreams, but those dreams had not yet come true. They had been married for 10 long years. 10 years of waiting. 10 years of hoping. 10 years of visiting doctors, pastors, and herbalists. 10 years of tears hidden behind smiles. First they were patient. "It will happen in God's time," Henry used to say, holding Magdalene's hand in the living room while they watched the rain fall outside the wide windows. Magdalene would smile and nod, even though her heart felt heavy like a stone. But the city was not patient. Their family was not patient. Even the newspapers whispered, "The great Henry of Grand Lagos has no heir." At parties, people would secretly look at Magdalene's stomach, hoping to see it round with pregnancy. Friends became distant. Some business partners began to question if Henry was truly blessed after all. One evening, after a long day of work, Henry sat in his quiet living room, staring at the empty space where he had once imagined a child would play. He rubbed his tired face and sighed deeply. Magdalene entered the room with a tray of tea, placing it gently on the table. She noticed the sadness in Henry's eyes. "Are you okay, my love?" she asked softly, sitting beside him. Henry forced a small smile. "I am fine, Maggie," he replied. But they both knew it was a lie. That night, Henry could not sleep. His mind was full of worries. His mother had called him earlier, her voice sharp and full of pressure. "Henry, my son," she had said, "you are not getting younger. Our name must not end like this. It is time to consider another option." Henry hated the idea, but the weight of expectations crushed his heart. He thought of Magdalene, how gentle and loving she had always been. The thought of hurting her felt like a knife in his chest. The next morning, Henry sat with Magdalene in their garden. The sun was bright, but their hearts were clouded. "Maggie," Henry began, his voice trembling, "there is something I need to say." Magdalene looked at him with concern. "I have tried to fight it," Henry continued. "But my family, the city, the pressure, they are all weighing me down. They say I should marry a second wife." For a moment Magdalene's heart stopped. Her eyes filled with tears, but she swallowed them quickly. She held Henry's hand tightly. "If this is what will bring you peace," she whispered, her voice shaking, "then I will not stop you." Tears rolled down Henry's face. "You are the best woman I have ever known," he said. Magdalene smiled through her pain, hiding her heartbreak like a professional actress in a sad movie. She had loved Henry too deeply to hold him back, even if it meant welcoming another woman into their home. And so, not long after, the city began to buzz with new gossip. "Henry has taken a second wife." Her name was Mabel. Mabel was young, beautiful, and full of charm. Her skin shone like polished bronze under the Lagos sun. Her long, curly hair always smelled of expensive perfumes, and her laughter was loud like the sirens of the city. She came from a well-connected family and knew how to capture attention in any room. When Mabel first arrived at Henry's mansion, Magdalene welcomed her with open arms. She helped her settle into the luxurious house, showed her the rooms, and even shared her favorite tea recipes. But deep inside, Mabel did not appreciate Magdalene's kindness. In fact, she saw Magdalene's gentle nature as a weakness. Why is this woman acting like a saint? Mabel thought secretly. She is just a shadow in this house. Soon, I will become the only queen of this palace. Mabel began to plant tiny seeds of trouble. First, it was small things. She would complain loudly that the house was too quiet and lifeless. She would roll her eyes when Magdalene walked into the room. She even started to sit in Magdalene's favorite chair at the dining table, claiming she preferred the view from there. Henry noticed the little changes, but he said nothing. He did not want to cause tension. Besides, he thought maybe they would all live together peacefully in time. But Mabel had other plans. In the evenings, when Magdalene prepared dinner, Mabel would walk into the kitchen and make loud comments. She would say, sniffing the air. I hope the next wife who comes here knows how to cook better. Magdalene's heart would break a little more each time, but she kept quiet. She told herself, peace is better than fighting. Soon, Mabel began to boast about her own beauty and her ability to give Henry a child. Very soon, Mabel said loudly in front of the maids, I will give Henry a strong son, and he will forget all his old sorrows. The words cut Magdalene like a sharp knife, but she remained calm on the outside. Inside, her heart was bleeding. What Mabel did not know was that Magdalene had been quietly visiting a new doctor in the city. She had been taking special treatments, praying every night, and holding on to hope like a small candle in a dark tunnel. One rainy morning, as thunder rolled over Grand Lagos, Magdalene felt a strange pain in her stomach. She rushed to the hospital, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. After many tests, the doctor smiled at her gently. Congratulations, Madam Magdalene, the doctor said. You are pregnant. Magdalene's eyes filled with tears of joy. She covered her mouth with her hands and began to cry, not from pain, but from happiness that she had waited so long to feel. She rushed home, her heart dancing, and found Henry in the living room. My love, she said, trembling with excitement. I have news. Henry stood up, worried at first. What is it, Maggie? I am carrying our child, Magdalene cried. Henry froze for a moment, as if he did not believe his ears. Then, like a flood, happiness rushed over him. He lifted Magdalene in his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. My God! Henry shouted. You have answered our prayers. The mansion, once so quiet and cold, suddenly felt warm and alive. Even the sun seemed to shine brighter that day. But not everyone was happy. When Mabel heard the news, her face turned dark like the clouds before a storm. Jealousy burned in her chest like fire. She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her skin. No, she thought. This cannot happen. If Magdalene has a child, I will lose everything. And from that moment, a dangerous plan began to grow in her heart. The sun rose over Grand Lagos, painting the sky with orange and gold. Cars hurried along the busy roads. Market women shouted their prices. Office workers rushed to catch the early bus. But inside Henry's tall mansion, something much darker than the shadows of the city was growing. Since the news of Magdalene's pregnancy, the atmosphere in the house had changed. Where there was once quiet sadness, there was now excitement and laughter. Henry had become a new man. He whistled while shaving in the morning. He bought new toys and clothes, even though the baby had not yet been born. He walked around the mansion smiling like a proud king. Magdalene glowed with happiness. Her cheeks were full of life, and her eyes sparkled like diamonds. Even the workers in the house, the cleaners and the cooks, felt the joy and prepared meals with extra care. But in one corner of the house, far from the light, there was Mabel. Mabel watched everything from her room on the second floor, behind her expensive curtains. Her eyes were full of fire, her heart heavy with bitterness. So now she is the queen of this house, Mabel thought bitterly. Everyone is smiling at her, but no one looks at me anymore. Even Henry barely notices me. She remembered how, just a few months ago, the house had been hers to command. Henry had bought her gifts, gold necklaces, shiny handbags, and shoes from Paris. He had praised her beauty and even promised her that soon she would bear him a child. But all that seemed to fade the moment Magdalene announced her pregnancy. One afternoon, as Magdalene relaxed in the living room, rubbing her growing belly and reading a book about motherhood, Mabel entered the room like a storm. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor. She stood in front of Magdalene and folded her arms. "So, you think you have one, Mabel said coldly. Magdalene looked up, her gentle eyes full of confusion. "Mabel, what do you mean?" Mabel's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Don't pretend, Magdalene. You think because you carry Henry's child now, you are better than me." Magdalene placed her book down slowly and stood up, holding her belly protectively. "Mabel, I have never seen this as a competition. This is our family. There is no need for war between us." But Mabel only laughed bitterly. "Family," she sneered. "The only family I care about is the one I create. And mark my words, Magdalene, I will give Henry children too. Strong children. Children who will inherit everything." With that, Mabel turned and walked away, leaving Magdalene feeling a chill deep in her bones. Days turned into weeks. Henry, too busy with his business and excitement over the baby, did not notice the growing tension between his wives. He thought all was well because Magdalene smiled, and Mabel said nothing in front of him. But behind closed doors, Mabel's wicked plans were growing. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled over Grand Lagos, Mabel visited an old woman in the dark corners of the city. The woman was known for her dangerous powers. She was called Madame Uju. Mabel sat before Madame Uju, her hands shaking slightly. "I need your help," Mabel whispered. The old woman's eyes were sharp like a hawk's. "You carry a heavy burden in your heart," Madame Uju said. "Speak." Mabel explained her jealousy, her fear of losing Henry's attention, and her hatred for Magdalene. "I want her out of the way," Mabel said. "I want her child gone so I can have the house, the wealth, and Henry all to myself." Madame Uju stirred a dark mixture in a clay pot, smoke rising from it like angry clouds. She looked deep into Mabel's eyes. "Be careful what you wish for," Madame Uju warned. "Jealousy is a fire that can burn even the hand that lights it." But Mabel's heart was too poisoned to listen. She paid the old woman and left with a small black pouch filled with charms and instructions. Back at the mansion, Mabel began to place the charms around Magdalene's room. She sprinkled powders under the bed, placed strange items near the windows, and whispered dark words late at night. But something unexpected happened. Instead of falling ill, Magdalene's pregnancy grew stronger. She became more radiant, and the doctor gave good reports at every visit. Henry was overjoyed and started preparing an even bigger celebration for the coming child. Mabel's frustration grew into fury. "Why are my plans not working?" she thought angrily. "Why does she continue to shine while I suffer in the shadows?" One bright morning, while Magdalene sat in the garden enjoying the fresh air, Mabel approached her again. "You think this baby will make Henry love you more than me?" Mabel asked, her eyes narrow like daggers. Magdalene looked at her calmly. "Mabel, love is not a battle to be won by tricks. Love is from the heart." Mabel's face twisted in anger. "We shall see," she said darkly. "We shall see who wins in the end." As Mabel stormed away, Magdalene's heart beat faster with worry. She could feel the danger growing around her, like storm clouds gathering in the sky. She prayed silently, holding her belly. "God, please protect my child," she whispered. The tension in the house became so thick it could almost be touched. Even the workers noticed. The maids avoided Mabel's sharp tongue. The cooks kept their distance, preparing meals quickly and escaping the kitchen. Henry, too busy with his latest building project, remained unaware of the danger growing in his own home. One night, as he returned home from work, He found Magdalene sitting alone in the living room, her eyes filled with silent tears. "My love," Henry said, rushing to her side. "What is wrong?" Magdalene hesitated but finally spoke. "Henry, I fear Mabel has hatred in her heart toward me and our baby." Henry frowned deeply. "Maggie, you know I love you. Nothing will come between us." But Magdalene shook her head slowly. "I do not feel safe anymore." Henry hugged her tightly, brushing her tears away. "No harm will come to you or our child. I promise." But promises, no matter how sweet, cannot stop a storm that is already rolling in. As Magdalene's belly grew, so did Mabel's wickedness. She began to spread lies about Magdalene to the outside world. She whispered to people in the market that Magdalene had used charms to get pregnant. She even told Henry's mother that Magdalene's child might not belong to Henry. One day, during a family gathering, Mabel smiled sweetly but spoke poisonous words. "Mother," she said to Henry's mother, "I only wish to protect our family name. But have you noticed how strange Magdalene's pregnancy has been? How quickly it happened after so many years." The older woman, already filled with traditional fears and superstitions, began to worry. "Are you saying?" she asked slowly. "I say nothing, mother," Mabel replied, pretending to be innocent. "I only want the best for this family." Soon rumors spread beyond the mansion. People in the city began to whisper again. "Did you hear? Henry's wife Magdalene might have used charms." The news reached Henry's ears, and though he tried to stay strong, the seeds of doubt began to grow. Magdalene felt the coldness too. Friends who once celebrated with her now avoided her eyes. Neighbors who once smiled now crossed to the other side of the road. Mabel watched all this with secret delight. Her plan was working slowly but surely. But deep inside, Magdalene remained brave. She prayed every night, holding her belly, speaking to her unborn child with hope. "My child," she whispered, "you are a blessing, not a curse. No matter what they say, I will protect you with my life." One evening, as the city lights blinked like stars, Magdalene sat by the window, watching the cars move along the busy roads. She felt a strong kick from the baby and smiled. But outside the window, hidden in the shadows, Mabel stood watching her, her eyes cold as ice. "Enjoy your happiness while it lasts," Mabel thought darkly. "Because soon it will all be over." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heart full of dark plans, her mind already dreaming of the next wicked step. The clouds over Grand Lagos were heavy and dark, hanging low in the sky like a thick blanket. The city, usually full of noise and bright lights, felt different that evening. The wind howled between the tall buildings, and the streets looked wet and shiny from the early rain. Inside Henry's mansion, the atmosphere was also heavy. It felt like the walls could sense that something terrible was about to happen. Magdalene, now heavily pregnant, sat in the nursery. Henry had decorated the room himself. Soft baby blue curtains, a white crib with golden edges, tiny shoes placed neatly on a shelf, and a rocking chair by the window. Magdalene rubbed her round belly gently, humming a song her mother used to sing when she was a child. She smiled, thinking of the day she would finally hold her baby in her arms. But outside the nursery, someone was not smiling. Mabel stood in the hallway, hidden in the shadows. Her eyes, once filled with hope for her own future, now burned with jealousy and rage. She watched Magdalene from the doorway, her heart beating fast like a drum in her chest. "That child will not take what belongs to me," she thought bitterly. "I will not be pushed aside like an old newspaper." She tightened her fists, her nails digging into her palms until they hurt. As night fell, thunder rolled across the city. Lightning flashed, lighting up the sky like a giant camera. Rain began to pour heavily, hitting the windows and rooftops like tiny stones. Henry arrived home, soaked from the storm. Magdalene rushed to meet him at the door, holding a towel. "My love, you are wet," she said, helping him dry off. Henry smiled at her warmth. "Don't worry, Maggie. The rain caught me, but I'm safe." He kissed her forehead and placed his hand gently on her belly. "Our baby is strong," Magdalene said with a proud smile. Henry's heart filled with joy. "Soon our house will be full of laughter," he replied. But in the corner of the room, hidden by the shadows, Mabel watched them with cold eyes. "Not if I can stop it," she thought. That night, Henry fell asleep quickly, tired from work and the storm. Magdalene, too, drifted off to sleep, her dreams full of peaceful thoughts of her unborn child. But Mabel did not sleep. Instead, she dressed in dark clothes and moved quietly through the house like a cat. The storm outside covered the sounds of her footsteps. She crept to Magdalene's room, her eyes fixed on the door. Slowly, she pushed the door open and slipped inside. Magdalene slept deeply, her hand resting protectively over her belly. The soft sound of her breathing filled the room. Mabel's heart pounded. For a moment she hesitated. A tiny voice inside her head whispered, "Stop! Don't do this." But then louder came the voice of her envy. "Do it. This is your only chance." With shaking hands, she picked up a small bag she had hidden under her clothes. Inside was a dark powder given to her by Madame Uju, a powder said to bring early labor. She sprinkled the powder into Magdalene's teacup, placed it back on the bedside table, and left the room quickly. The next morning, Magdalene woke up with sharp pains in her belly. She called out weakly, and the housemaid rushed in. "Madam! Madam!" the maid shouted, running to wake Henry. Henry leapt out of bed, fear flashing in his eyes. He carried Magdalene to the car himself, and they rushed to the hospital through the heavy rain. Mabel, pretending to be concerned, followed closely behind, hiding her wicked excitement under a mask of worry. At the hospital, the doctors worked quickly. Henry held Magdalene's hand tightly as she cried out in pain. "Stay strong, my love," Henry said, tears running down his face. Finally, after hours of struggle, the cry of a newborn baby filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. Henry fell to his knees, crying with joy. Magdalene, exhausted but smiling, held her baby close. "My David," she whispered, naming him as they had always dreamed. The family's joy filled the hospital room like sunlight after a long storm. But outside the room, in a quiet corner, Mabel watched with burning hatred. "So this is the boy who will take my place," she thought darkly. "Never." Later that evening, the family returned home. The storm had calmed a little, but the sky was still cloudy, and the wind carried a cold bite. Henry and Magdalene placed baby David gently in his crib. Henry could not stop smiling as he watched his son sleep. "This is the happiest day of my life," he said. Magdalene nodded, her eyes filled with love. They kissed David goodnight and went to their room to rest. But Mabel did not rest. As soon as the house was quiet, she slipped into the nursery. She stared down at baby David, her heart full of twisted thoughts. The baby slept peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "You do not belong here," Mabel whispered. With shaky hands, she picked up the baby, wrapping him in a blanket. Lightning flashed outside, casting strange shadows on the walls. Mabel hurried through the house, her heart racing. She opened the front door quietly, stepping out into the cold, wet night. The rain began to fall again, heavier this time, as if the sky itself was crying. Mabel walked quickly through the dark streets, clutching the baby close to her chest. She headed towards the old canal at the edge of the city, where the water ran deep and strong after the heavy rains. The streets were empty, except for a few stray dogs seeking shelter. Mabel's mind was a storm of its own. Doubts and fears flashed like lightning inside her head. "Maybe I should stop," a small voice said. But the louder voice of envy shouted, "Finish it. Remove him forever." At the canal, the water roared like a wild beast. Mabel stood at the edge, the cold wind whipping around her. She looked down at baby David, who opened his innocent eyes for a brief moment. For the first time, Mabel felt a flicker of guilt, but she pushed it away. "This is for my future," she whispered. And with that she let go. The baby, wrapped tightly in the blanket, fell into the rushing water. Mabel turned away quickly, her heart pounding so loudly it filled her ears. She ran back to the mansion, breathing heavily. Back at home, Magdalene woke with a sudden scream. "My baby!" she cried, her heart pounding in terror. Henry rushed to the nursery and found the crib empty. "David! Where is David?" he shouted. Panic filled the house. The maids searched every room. The guards ran through the compound with flashlights. But David was gone. Henry collapsed to his knees, crying out in pain. Magdalene, weak from childbirth, fainted in her husband's arms. The house, once filled with joy, now echoed with sorrow. The police were called. Flyers were printed and spread across the city. "Missing baby, reward offered," the posters read. The whole city joined the search. People cried for the family. Mothers hugged their children tighter, and fathers prayed for Henry and Magdalene. But there was no sign of baby David. Mabel pretended to cry too, hiding her dark secret behind fake tears. Henry grew quiet and cold, his heart shattered. Magdalene refused to eat, spending her days staring at the empty crib, hoping, praying for a miracle. The house became a place of mourning. And far away, in the wild waters of the canal, a twist of fate happened. A local fisherman named Baba Tund, who had gone to check his fishing traps, spotted something strange caught between two rocks. It was a small bundle, soaked but still tight. Curious and worried, he pulled the bundle from the water and found a baby inside, alive but cold and weak. Shocked, Baba Tund rushed the child to his home, wrapping him in warm cloths. "My God, you are alive," he whispered. Baba Tund, a kind man with no children of his own, decided to care for the child as if he were his own. "I will call you Emmanuel," he said, which means God is with us. The baby, safe at last, slept peacefully in Baba Tund's humble home, while his real family, far away, mourned his loss without knowing that hope was still alive.